All right. Cool. We are live. Hope you guys are having a great day whenever you guys are listening to this. I'm really excited for this episode because I think this is going to be a pretty big wake up call for a lot of people. Hopefully for people who are starting their fitness journeys and they're starting to like get these habits down that are ultimately going to lead to results long term. But also, honestly, for this is kind of a message for a lot of my clients too. I think it's going to be really beneficial to listen to this because it was, this whole entire podcast episode. Actually, let me start here. This whole episode was sparked by a post that I saw from another online fitness coach. His name is Jeff Sue. His Instagram name is First Call Out Fitness, by the way, if you want to follow him. But he posted this on Instagram. I think it was yesterday, as the day I'm recording this. And this post really spoke to me on a lot of feelings I've been having, and feelings I've been having for a long period of time of like what it takes to actually start seeing results. And from working with all the clients I've worked with, since coaching from 2017 when I started, this is a common theme that has come up a lot. And I feel like it finally was like, I don't know, I've articulated it in ways before, but I feel like this post really articulated it the way that I've been trying to for so long. So let me just read the post here. So there was a picture in the post, and the picture says, once you achieve consistency, you then need to be consistent with that consistency before results begin to show. Don't confuse progress with results. They are not the same thing. And then the caption says, the weeks or months of struggle it takes to finally begin to eat 4 to 5 meals per day, or finally get to 6 to 8,000 steps per day, or finally get your form right on your training does not count. Progress is progress. Progress doesn't mean results. Progress encompasses the steps you need to take to get results. So hopefully all that made sense. Definitely rewind this and go back and listen if you need to listen to that post again. But I'm gonna explain this a little bit in my own words too, why it really hits home, and why the idea of progress not equaling results, why ingraining that in your head, especially if you're somebody who's just starting out with all this, with the nutrition side of things, you're just starting working out, you're just starting to track your steps or go on walks throughout the day, and you're just getting all these baseline habits down. Why this is so important. And the whole gist behind this is that there is required work that you need to put in without expecting any results to come to fruition necessarily. There's a baseline of habits that you need to build, of hitting a certain amount of steps, of getting a certain consistency down with your nutrition. There's habits that you need to build as far as being consistent in the gym and consistently getting in, let's say 3 workouts in a week. You have to build that skill or those habits or those behaviors up in order for the clock to start ticking, where you could start counting towards time you should be seeing results by. But if it takes you 4 weeks or 8 weeks to get that consistency down with being consistent with your nutrition, or being consistent with your walking, or being consistent with your workouts, then that clock that ticks as far as how many, if you're trying to calculate or in your head you're thinking how long it's taking you to see results, that clock doesn't start until that consistency is down first. And all those prior 8 weeks of you building those habits or building that consistency, it's not useless, right? Because it's required in order to see results. You just can't expect results to happen during that time period. It's still progress, but it's not results. It's almost like, and I'm going to give you some analogies to try to hopefully really hammer this home for you. But it's like building a house. You hired, contractors, whoever, to build a house for you. And they have to put the foundation in, they have to put the walls up, they have to put the roof on, floor, all that stuff. And let's say if the ultimate result you're wanting is to be able to sleep in the house, right? You want to live in the house. That's the result that you are wanting to you're really striving for, right? That's the physical result that you get to see is a finished house that you can actually stay in. Same thing goes for maybe the result that you want to see is seeing the scale start to go down or see, fat loss actually occur on your body. But that can't happen regarding the house, you living in the house, until the required steps of, like I said, putting in the foundation, putting the walls up, putting the roof on, putting the flooring down. All that has to happen first before you even get to see that result of like an actual finished house. And the same thing happens with fitness, fat loss, weight loss, whatever your goal is. That building of those habits, building of that foundation of hitting, a certain amount of steps, hitting, your nutrition consistently, not just a day here and there, hitting your workouts consistently, not just sporadically hitting it. All of that is you building this foundation to then finally, after all that is built, you get to start to see results. Not that you get your, full cake of being down 20 pounds that you wanted to, achieve. You don't get to start to actually see the results typically until those baseline habits are actually all established. Another example is, let's say you're going to medical school because you want to be a doctor, right? And the big payoff, the big result of being a doctor is obviously, like, if you want to be a doctor and you enjoy that work, you get to do something you love, right? That's a big payoff. But big payoff that a lot of people think of in their heads when it comes to being a doctor is, making a good salary, like having a good paycheck. But in order to get to that point, to start making that good paycheck and start seeing that result of, making a decent income, you have to go through medical school. You have to go through residency. You have to go through all of the hardships of working insane hours with very little pay, very little sleep, a lot of stress, all of that, all the education, all the studying, all the exams, all of that. You have to go through all that before you even get a taste of that result of making that good salary, right? It's not like you go through all those years of hardship of medical school and residency to then finally, once you become what's called an attending, so you finish your residency and you're, you're already a doctor in residency, but you're on your own, like officially. Once you get to that point, you don't automatically get like this huge lump sum of, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You just get one higher paycheck, but you still have to continue working to see that paycheck pay off, week after week, month after month. Same thing goes with like fat loss and fitness. If you want to lose 20 pounds, you might spend a couple of months building the habit of getting your step count consistent, building the habit of getting your nutrition consistent, building the habit of getting your workouts consistent. You might spend 2 months getting that consistency down without seeing any fat loss occur. And then once that 8-week mark hits, let's say you have all those habits down, you've built up all those behaviors, you've made all that progress towards your habits each day. Then at the 8-week mark, then progress actually starts, or not progress, I should say results actually start to be seen. But after that 8-week mark, like you've still put in all that work, right? It's still effort and work building those habits, but you can't expect to lose like the typical 8 or 1 pound per week on average when you're still building that baseline foundation. Another example, you're preparing for a trip across the country. Like you and your family, you're decide you want to go on a vacation this summer, and you're planning a trip to, I don't know, maybe you're planning a trip to California or Florida or whatever, and you live across the country. There's so much work or prep that needs to be done for that trip before you even get in your car and start on the road. Like let's say you're driving across the country for this trip. And there's so much work or prep that needs to be put into that trip before you even start to see the result of your location changing, of being on the road and seeing you get closer to your destination, right? Like, you have to book the hotel or look for hotels. You have to book the hotel or look for Airbnbs, book that. You have to plan your meals, like where are you going to eat? How are you going to eat? You have to plan, how many days you're going to be there. You have to plan, okay, what clothes am I going to pack, especially if you have kids? What are you going to pack for them? You got to plan what toys or whatever you're going to bring. You got to plan, okay, maybe what gas station stops are we going to go to, or how often are we going to stop? You have to plan all this stuff, right? There's so much plan and work that's required for this trip before you even get on the road and see your destination change or your current location change. Same thing goes for fitness and fat loss. Like, there are so many habits that you need to build. There's so much consistency that you have to learn how to execute on before your actual location starts to change, meaning you actually start to see movement on the scale or start to see your physical results actually changing. Like, just because you're putting in prep or work for a couple of weeks and it feels like work, it feels like effort, doesn't mean that you are doing enough or you're at the point where you actually should expect actual results to come. There's a certain amount of quote unquote progress or work or habit building that needs to take place before the results actually start moving. Like, putting in effort or work alone is not enough and doesn't entitle you to actually see results. And I know, like, a lot of people don't want to accept that, but just because you're putting in work and it feels like effort doesn't mean that you deserve results or that results are necessarily going to happen. You have to be doing the right work. Obviously, if you're doing a bunch of wrong things, even though it feels like work, it's not going to get you forward, right? Like, if you're, trying to, I don't know, trying to think of like an analogy or an example, but if you're, studying for an exam and the exam is on algebra, but you're studying like, I don't know, biology, like that's still work to study biology, but it's not the right work, right? So we have to be doing the right work, but we also have to be doing the correct level of work too for a long enough period of time or consistent enough to actually get the results train moving. Like, there's a threshold of work that you need to do to actually start seeing the results or seeing your result change. It's not as simple as, is this hard? Is this work? Even, is this the right work? But is it the right level? Is it the right threshold, right? Like, me, for example, too, I've been working out for a long period of time. I've been really training. I mean, I was working out, started in like high school, and really seriously working out the right way since like freshman, sophomore year of college. But I could go in the gym like once a week and work my ass off with my workouts once a week. But because of the level I'm at, like, I would say if I would label myself as beginner, intermediate, or advanced, I'm probably intermediate, getting maybe close to the advanced range, but I would say probably late intermediate, let's say. Like, going into the gym once a week, and even if I absolutely kill myself once a week in the gym and really push myself, it's not a high enough threshold for actual results to happen for me. And same thing with you, with whatever kind of goal you have. Like, 10,000 steps might be the threshold you need to actually see fat loss. So if 5,000 steps feels like work to you, it's progress, it's effort, it's the step in the right direction, but it's not meeting that threshold to actually see the fat loss you want. Now, it's not saying hitting 5,000 steps is pointless or meaningless, because if you're starting at 2,000, like, hitting 5,000 is progress and it's movement in the right direction, but you might need that threshold eventually of 10,000 until you can actually expect like actual physical results to happen. So like, I find so many people have this like expectation that like, just because they're putting in work that they should actually be seeing results like immediately. But like I said, there's a threshold and there's a consistency level that you have to meet, and then you have to be consistent with that threshold and that consistency level to then see results, going forward for a long period of time. And also too, like, just going back to the example with like, prepping for a vacation, a trip across country that you're driving, just because you aren't visually or physically moving at all, right, in your car moving, does not mean that progress hasn't been made with this trip. Like, you planning all the hotels, booking all that stuff, packing the car, that is progress, and it is required. It's just the result of your current location or your current state changing hasn't actually happened yet. But that results is required, or that progress is required to have the capability to get results. Like, if you don't pack your car and you don't book the hotels and you don't plan the trip, you're not actually going to get in the car and take off on the road. So, I don't want you to get the idea of, like, listening to this, that this progress stage you need to try and skip, because the progress stage is required to have the capability to get the results that you want. And like I said, going back to, that travel example, like, all those things are required to get that payoff of actually getting closer to that destination of your vacation. Same thing with, the medical school example. All that work in medical school residency is required to get to that payoff of finally starting to, be a doctor on your own and, get that, higher salary that you want. And the other example too, like building a house, all of that work as far as the foundation, the sides, all that is required before you actually even get the result or get a taste of the result of actually being able to, like, live in that house. So if you have the expectation of, like, I want to see results, you need to be honest about the amount of time you've been building the skills up versus the time that you have already had the skills and the consistency and have started from there. Because there are two different timelines. There's a timeline of building the skills that you need to actually be consistent with the threshold you need to see results. Then there's the timeline where it starts, where the habits are built, the threshold is there, and now you're consistent with that threshold and those skills going forward. So, let me give you some examples of this too. Specific examples when it comes to fitness, because I've given you some examples with, like, all that other stuff. But let's give some, like, fitness examples with this. So, let's say, like, some clients, like I said, need 10,000 steps per day to start seeing results. But they come into the program and they start at 3,000 per day. I have all my clients, when they first start out, just track their usual food intake, track their usual steps, so we get a baseline of what they're currently doing. And let's say you come into the program and you are starting at 3,000 steps per day. But in order for fat loss to actually occur for you, you have to be doing 10,000 per day. But we can't just jump straight up to 10,000, because if you're used to doing 3 and we jump up to 10, you're probably going to, set yourself up for failure and not be able to hit 10, or it's not going to be sustainable. So we have to inch our way up there or slowly build up to 10,000. So let's say it takes a couple weeks then, like, after the first week, we set your step goal at 5,000. So we bump it up by a couple thousand. But it takes you a couple of weeks to learn how to manage 5,000 steps per day based on your schedule, based on how much you work, based on maybe your energy levels, fitting it in with kids, sporting events, all that. It takes you a couple of weeks to actually manage 5,000 and be consistent with 5,000. And then after that, okay, once we're consistent with 5,000 steps, it takes a couple of weeks for you to hit your next target, which is maybe 7,000 steps per day. We go up by another couple thousand. And it takes you another couple weeks in order to manage 7,000 and be consistent with that, as the weeks go on, because of kind of the same variables, right? You're trying to manage a couple thousand extra steps with work, kids, and all that. Once we get to 7,000, now maybe we bump up to, let's say, 8,500. We go up by another 1,500 steps. And that takes another couple of weeks to manage the 8,500. And then from there, after you're consistent with hitting 8,500, and when I say consistent, I mean at least 5 out of the 7 days of the week. If you're hitting it less than 5, then you're not really being consistent, because that's almost 50% or less of the total week. So you're hitting the 8,500 steps at least 5, if not 6 or 7 days out of the week. Then we go up to 10. We finally hit that threshold that you need to actually start seeing fat loss. And you look back and you're like, hey, I've been in this program for 8 weeks and I haven't lost any weight, or I haven't lost any body fat. And you look back and you're like, well, like, why have I not seen more results, over this time period? I've been, putting in work, and it's been hard and it's been effort. But keep in mind, going back to, the whole point of this podcast and what I've been talking about is, we finally just got up to the threshold that we need to start moving. So now, as of today, once you finally got up to that 10,000 step mark and started being consistent 5 out of the 7 days a week of that, now we finally hit that threshold to actually get things moving. Now is when you're, if you're going to, like, I always urge clients to, like, in anybody, even if they're not a client, they're doing this on their own, to really ditch the timelines, because you can get really in your head if you feel like, oh, like it's been 2 months and like, I thought I should have lost this weight, and you get frustrated in this and that. So I always say, like, ditch the timelines anyway, because a lot of times they do more harm than good. But if you do have a timeline of, okay, losing 1 pound of fat per week on average is a healthy rate. So after 8 weeks, I'm kind of expecting to lose maybe close to 8 pounds. And like I said, that's a healthy rate for most people to lose. That 8-week timeline mark doesn't start until you actually hit that threshold and get consistent with it. It doesn't start on day one when, you're struggling to get consistent with 5,000 steps, or you're struggling to get consistent with 7,000 if the threshold you need is 10,000. So you have to be realistic about that. And it doesn't mean that all that previous time is wasted and doesn't count and doesn't mean anything, because it absolutely does. Like, that previous time was progress, but it was progress towards that threshold, and progress towards building those habits, and progress towards building that consistency that you need to actually get the results you want. Another example when it comes to fitness and nutrition that I see a lot of times with clients is it's the same thing when you need a certain amount of calories to see fat loss or see results. It might take a couple of weeks when you first join a program, or maybe you're doing it on your own, to learn how to actually, like, log your food. Like, logging your food is a skill. Pulling out MyFitnessPal, learning how to, like, weigh things accurately. You'll be surprised at how many people actually, like, really misaccurately track their food. So it is a skill. And depending on, like, where you come into the program at, like, I have some clients who come into the program and they've tracked their food for years, but they were just eating the wrong amounts, and that's why they weren't seeing progress. But they have the skill down of tracking their food. And for them, they might immediately in the beginning have that skill already down of tracking their food. So they're able to go through this progress stage a little bit faster and then get to the result stage. But other clients might not have any experience with tracking at all. So it might take them a couple of weeks to really learn learn the skill of logging their food. And then from there, it might take them another couple of weeks. Once they actually just figure out how to log their food, it might take them another couple of weeks to learn how to hit their calories and their protein at the same time. And then from there, it might take another couple of weeks for them to learn how to manage eating out at restaurants while still hitting their targets and being consistent with there. And then it might take another couple of weeks for them to learn how to manage being busy at work or dealing with kids and what their kids want to eat for food and all this stuff while still hitting their goal. And it might take them 4 to 6 weeks to actually be able to track their food, consistently hit their calories and protein at least 5 out of the 7 days. Like these previous weeks that I just mentioned in this example, maybe they're hitting, their calories and their protein, maybe like 3 out of the 7 leading up to this point. And now after 4 to 6 weeks, they're finally learning how to hit their targets 5 out of the 7, if not 6 or 7 days out of the week. That's where the results will start to happen, is after that 4 to 6 week time period, after they actually, or you actually, get the skill down of hitting your targets, hitting them consistently, at least 5 out of the 7 days of the week, if not more. That's when your timeline for the results stage starts to happen. And you can't go through that progress stage of making progress towards your habits, making progress towards your behaviors, putting in effort and work. You can't mistake that for a time period you should be seeing results, because the threshold isn't there, right? Like if you're not used to tracking your food, not used to paying attention to your nutrition at all, and you start even just logging your food, that will feel like some work. Like it's not necessarily easy, and it's a deviation from your current lifestyle, so it's going to feel hard, but it's not that meeting that threshold of hitting your certain calorie range or protein range at least 5 out of the 7 days a week. It's not hitting that threshold yet to actually see the results that are coming. So there's another example with it. And if you never achieve, this true consistency of at least 5 out of the 7 days you're hitting all of, like, you're hitting your calories, your protein, your steps, and your workouts. Like, if you're not hitting those 5 out of the 7 days a week, and you're not hitting that threshold and that consistency, if you never get to that point, like, for example, let's say if you're never able to get past 5,000 steps, but you need 10,000 steps to actually start seeing fat loss. Or let's say if, like I said, you have to be consistent with your nutrition, hitting your targets with nutrition 5 out of the 7 days of the week, but you're only ever hitting it 3, maybe 4 here and there, then the result stage might not ever really start to happen for you. You might start to like feel better because, you're making some changes to your habits, which are good changes. You might start to maybe notice a little differences here and there, but the true result stage where the results are consistent, they're predictable, and you start to like just really build momentum, and it's like, oh, like I'm down a pound of fat on average this week. And then, okay, another few weeks go by and now I see I'm down like 5 pounds on average. And then another few weeks go by. You might never ever get to that result stage if you continue to struggle with hitting that threshold and also continue to struggle with the consistency you need to actually start seeing the results happen. And like I said, if this progress stage, this stage of you building these habits and finally getting the consistency down and finally building your steps up, maybe it takes you 4 months to finally get to that point, to that result stage. It doesn't mean that those 4 months are useless or wasted time. It doesn't mean that those 4 months, didn't mean anything or didn't matter, because those 4 months were a prerequisite. They were required to get to that result stage. So I don't want you to like mistake this and think, okay, this progress stage of me building these habits and building consistency is a waste, because it's not. But you just have to, change your expectations. You have to change the way you view, like when you look back at the past couple months and like think back, and if you're frustrated on the lack of results you might have, like think, how long were you actually in the progress stage of building this consistency and building habits versus the actual result stage where the consistency and habits are there and you're just executing on a daily basis with them. Because I truly believe if we can avoid a lot of this frustration that comes with fitness and nutrition and a lot of these false expectations of how fast results should come, then I think we can avoid or prevent so many people from quitting and then ultimately failing because they quit. Because I find a big reason when I talk to clients, when I talk to potential clients or people just in the DMs, big reason why they give up is because they're expecting to see a certain result after putting in a certain amount of work for, let's say, a few weeks or a month, and not seeing the result that they expected. But if they really took a look at how much of this time was in this progress stage of just building these habits and consistency versus how much of this time was actually being consistent and in the result stage, their expectations would be adjusted probably, and then they wouldn't have that frustration, and they would understand, hey, this is part of the process. I'm still building the consistency. I'm still building the threshold. I'm achieving progress in my daily habits. The results might not be showing yet, but I'm building something good. I'm building something big. And then once I get to that result stage with the consistency and the threshold down, then the results will come. And that like hope and knowing the results will come once they get to that part, I think will push people to keep going instead of giving up. And there will always be times in your journey where progress is the focus and results might not be the focus. Like there are times where, like if you try something new too, where there will be times where you're just focusing on progress, building consistency in the threshold, and maybe not seeing results, right? Like think about like when you try to learn a new sport or something like that. Like there's a period of like a learning curve where you're just learning how to like, execute on the movements or whatever. Like let's say if it's like if I haven't played basketball in like years and I decided I wanted to go shoot hoops, like there's a learning curve for the first like probably 10 minutes of shooting where I'm like learning how to actually shoot the ball again before I can actually start to see the results come of me being more accurate with my shooting. So just one example there. But also too, with all this, I want you to really take this in, whether you're just somebody watching, live or listening to this later, or you're, one of my clients. Remember that you control how quickly you get to that results stage or that results phase by executing, by hitting your targets, and being adaptable. So you can hit that threshold and build that consistency regardless of what obstacles you're running into in life or whatever obstacles life throws at you. Like, we all have things that pop up in our life. You know, kids get sick, so they have to stay home from daycare or school. We all have things like, you know, work needs us to work extra or whatever. We have to stay later there. Something else pops up. We have family events. We have weeks where people want to like take us out to lunch or dinner, or we have, you know, maybe even it's like a birthday week or a holiday week and there's different events planned and everything, you know, maybe a few days a week. We all have that stuff going on. But we have to remember that we don't have to be perfect to see results, but we also can't use every life inconvenience to justify not hitting your daily targets. Like, if you use every inconvenience or every obstacle that pops up in your daily life as a reason why, oh, like I was going to hit my, you know, calorie goal or my protein, but then like, you know, I had to stay later for work, so I didn't have time to prep and this and that. And then you know, end up not hitting your goals. If you use every little instance like that as justification to not hitting your goals, then you might stay in this progress stage forever. You might never actually be able to move to this result stage. And that's another problem I see is people like end up giving in to every life obstacle, or they think that like when other people have these obstacles, they give in too. And they're like, well, like I'm just going to give in. If you use that as justification to not hit your goals all the time, you will always be like working hard, right? You always feel like you're putting in work, right? You're tracking your food, but then just end up not hitting your goal throughout the day. You're, you know, hitting your workouts inconsistently, but you're still hitting some workouts. So you feel like you're putting in work. You're still putting in work and effort, and you might always be putting in work and effort, but it's so inconsistent and it's not at the threshold you need to see results that the actual results might actually like never come. And you might be in this kind of like middle ground, wishy-washy progress stage forever, right? Where you're still always just trying to build these habits. So we have to not let life obstacles prevent us from moving into that result stage. We have to not let life obstacles prevent us from building that consistency and building that threshold. And we have to do it regardless. We have to hit those targets, our calories, our protein, our steps, and our workouts. We have to hit those things despite the life inconveniences that might pop up. Like I said, here and there, it's not going to make or break you. You can still see results, you know, executing. Most people can 5 out of the 7 days a week. So if you have a couple days that are off, as long as they're not like crazy out there, you're still probably going to see results. But if you're having these life instances pop up that's preventing you from at least executing 5 out of the 7 days of the week, and, you know, it's like 3 days you're hitting your goal, or 4 days, or even 2 days, and that's a pretty consistent theme for you, you have to find a way to hit those targets regardless of, you know, the obstacles you're running into, or you're going to be forever stuck in this progress stage where you have, you know, decent habits, you're, you know, maybe slowly building on them, but you're not meeting the threshold or consistency to actually see the results and the actual change physically or visually in your body that you want. So hopefully it's all made sense. Hopefully the analogies helped. Hopefully this was actually, you know, a little bit of a wake-up call. If you, like, if being in that progress stage of being, you know, semi-consistent all the time and not meeting that threshold you need, if that sounds like you, hopefully this was a wake-up call to actually make it happen regardless. Like, hit those targets regardless so you can hit that threshold and you can meet that consistency to actually start seeing results come about. So thank you so much for watching. Would definitely love to hear any comments, or, you know, in the comment section. Yeah, hear any comments in the comment section, see any comments about if this was eye-opening, if this, you know, was enlightening in any way, if this sounds like you at all, if this is something that you've struggled with. And also too, just one like little last note, everyone's threshold is different. One person's threshold to see results might be 6,000 steps. Another person's threshold to see results might be 10,000. Another person's threshold might be this or that. So just a little side note, I know I use the examples of 10,000 steps per day, but like that's not everyone's threshold. So just don't mistake that. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe. All this stuff, post it on your Instagram or Facebook stories if you think it would help. I really appreciate like all of you and everyone who shares any of my stuff, so we can get the word out there and help more people change their lives for the better. So appreciate you all, and I will see you guys in the next one.